See Beneath Your Beautiful podcast is raw and intimate, sometimes funny, and always entertaining. With new episodes every Saturday, Hara explores our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
My name is Leticia. I am originally from Bermuda. I am a business mindset coach currently living in England with my husband and two beautiful children. At the age of 7, I was told by a family member that my birth was the reason for my parents' divorce. And that was a defining moment in my life. Mm-hmm. It created a narrative that I wasn't worthy.
Right.
I wasn't enough because I broke up the most significant relationship in my life. Both parents remarried and both of their spouses made their dislike known to me.
We always tell kids, you're not the reason the marriage broke up, of course, right? But you believed it.
I believed it wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I know it's not true now because I had a conversation with my mother 20 years or so later. Mm-hmm. And she said she had wished I had told her about it when I was 7 because she can see how that changed things for me. You know?
Yeah.
Both parents' spouses really made their dislike known for me. So I was really feeling like I was in the middle of two family units. Mm. My mom had her family, my dad had his family, and there was really no place for me. So I spent years looking for attention, acting out, and things that I used to hear all the time is you're too much, you got too much attitude, you got too much opinion, you're too smart for your own good. So I have this huge personality that wasn't being accepted, mm-hmm. which had me questioning myself even more. Mm-hmm. And by the time I was 14, I was just looking for someone to love me for me, to accept me for me. And I met this man that was twice my age. He was 28. Mm-hmm. And he was like my knight in shining armor. He was my escape from the emotional neglect that I was experiencing at home. He accepted me initially, but it was enough for me to really attach myself to him. Mm-hmm. And being a 14-year-old, you don't understand grooming. You don't understand how inappropriate that relationship is. Mm-hmm. My mom found out about him very early on in the relationship. Bermuda's small, your neighbors know more about your business than you do. Mm-hmm. And she did a background check on him. And I remember her coming to me and saying, listen, this man is dangerous. You need to leave him alone. But I don't really have a great relationship with you. I'm a teenage girl. Come on. I'm not listening to my mama. Like,
exactly.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
And I dismissed that. Mm-hmm. Things were great for a while. And then he started making comments like, you owe me. No one else in the world loves you. And you begin to believe that because this person is your person. Like, he has to be my person. Like, he's made me feel so great. And I've heard, so many negative things my entire life. He's not wrong. He loves mm-hmm. me. He showed me that. Mm-hmm. I was almost 16 when he put his hands on me for the first time. He choked me. He believed that somebody at my school liked me and he was jealous of that. And I knew that that's not a relationship I need to be in. I was conscious that man should not put their hands on you in a relationship. So I was spending a lot of time at his house. I packed up all my stuff in a trash bag and I left. So now that I don't have this escape, I'm back home all the time. I'm constantly getting into arguments with my parents, fights with my mom. And I remember one night having an argument with my mother's husband. And I remember saying, I should just kill myself. And this man mocked me. He called my mama into the kitchen. He called my little sisters into the kitchen. They were so young, they don't even have a memory of this. And was like, oh, you're going to kill yourself? Well, let's watch. And I took a handful of a leave and I left the house. And my mom came after me to take me to the hospital. And I remember being in the car saying how angry she was that I would even think about taking my life. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, you weren't that angry when you watched me take the pills. You didn't stop me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That created a lot of anger for me, that incident. I remember being in the hospital and just feeling like, why did she even come after me? There was an incident after that where I had gotten into an argument with my mom, and I moved in with my father for a short period of time. And I thought everything was going well. Like, I felt comfortable there, you know. And I remember one afternoon he came home and it was like, oh, we need to talk. My wife doesn't want to raise another child, so you're going to have to go back home. And I remember just thinking, wow, okay. That angered me significantly. Yeah. And I was like a walking volcano after that. You couldn't say anything to me without me exploding. And I'm about 17 now. I got into an argument with my mom, which ended up getting physical. And a couple of days later, I come home from school and there was a notice of a registered letter or a certified letter. And I'm like, well, where would this be coming from? So I thought it was from my daddy. You know, we hadn't had any communications. I thought it was from him. And I'm saying this to my mama, like, who would send me a registered letter? I don't know, you know. So I go pick up this letter and it was from my mother's lawyer.
Oh, wow.
Saying that I am no longer allowed on her property. And if I return, I will be escorted off the property by the police.
Why didn't she just tell you? Why was the lawyers involved in everything?
I suspect that it wasn't her decision.
Oh, her husband's?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm essentially homeless and I have nowhere to go. And the only person that I knew to call was this man that had assaulted me. And he welcomed me back with open arms, but that came with immediate psychological abuse. He reminded me almost on a daily basis that he's the only one in my corner. He's the only person that I can depend on. And I owe him my life, basically. You know, his feeding me, his putting a roof over my head. I owe him. I went through years of that. And there was physical abuse, but what was I to do about it? I eventually secured a job in law enforcement. And I think that's when things got a bit worse for me. We married when I was 19. And once we got married, the abuse was intense. He made it known that I was his property.
Oh, okay.
He can do whatever he liked with me. And that meant, you know, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. It was a lot going on. A lot of times when I tell people this story, they tell me, well, you worked in law enforcement, you had a way out. But I really didn't. I worked alongside police officers and I saw their human element. I think as a civilian, you often believe like, you know, they're really here to protect and serve me unless you had a negative experience with them. But going and working alongside the police and seeing how they talked about people, how they joked about people's issues, how they spread people's business, it made me feel insecure as a civilian because I didn't want them to spread my business. Yeah. And because I worked alongside of them, it wasn't like I was just somebody anonymous having an issue. Right. Oh my goodness, Leticia's husband beats her. Right. You know, I didn't want that known.
Did you tell anybody?
I told a few people bits and pieces of what was going on. So no one ever knew the full picture. Mm-hmm. I dripped out information as I could. And the one person that knew what was really going on was my doctor. I would go to my doctor when we had incidents to make note of my injuries. Oh, okay. To protect myself if anything really, truly went wrong. I had enough fear in this situation that I was in to know that I was in a dangerous position. Mm-hmm. He drank a lot, you know, so a lot of times the issues that we had, he wasn't fully aware of what was happening. And I saw how violent he was with men. So I was scared.
I see.
As I work in making pretty good money, I decided that I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to go to university. And I remember having a conversation with him and saying, you know, I want to go to the States, go to university. And he was like, no, absolutely not. You should have done that before we got married. There's no way that you're leaving. And believe it or not, it wasn't the abuse that made me want to leave the marriage. It was the fact that I could see that he was holding me back. I am an education junkie. Mm-hmm. I love to learn. If I could be a professional student, I'll be in school right now. Like, I just love education. So for me, that's when I started kind of checking out of the relationship, because I'm like, you don't want me to get an education? Right. You know?
Right.
I remember one night coming home from work, and I had painted a very pretty picture of my relationship because, you know, because of the age difference from early on, people questioned it. People had things to say, and you feel like you have to defend your relationship. So I defended my relationship. I painted a pretty picture. One of the things that he used to do to apologize to me was buy Louis Vuitton for me. Mm-hmm. So I used to, you know, my husband bought me Louis Vuitton, you know, just amazing picture. And a lot of my friends thought that I was living a great life. Mm-hmm. They used to come to me for advice. And one night, my friend called and she was telling me about being in an abusive relationship. She doesn't know what to do, you know. And I was giving her all the advice that I need to give, you know, leave, you deserve better. Like, come on, like, but not about that life, you know. And at that time, I was reading a lot of self-help and self-motivation books. And I was reading a book by Ian Levinsant called Until Today. And I picked up this book and I randomly opened the book and I read her the passage. And it was talking about the reason why our interpersonal relationships don't work is because we are trying to keep people in our lives that no longer serve a purpose. So people are in our lives for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. And most times we try to hold on to people who's already served their reason in our lives. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there and I'm reading this to her. And I felt like a sinner in church because this is why this relationship's like, we're not meant to be together, right? Mm-hmm. It was significant because that night he came home and he was very drunk. He had my cell phone, and in the cell phone was messages with another man. Mm-hmm. As soon as I had checked out, I saw the tension elsewhere. And he was angry, very, very angry. Mm-hmm. And after years of abuse, you kind of know that this incident that you're about to have is either going to be bad or very, very bad.
Okay.
And I remember looking in his eyes, and there was just something in there that night that it literally scared me. And I remember running to the landline and calling my mother and telling her, you need to come get me right now. Like, you need to come right now. And he ripped the landline out of the wall. So I didn't even know if she heard me. It was just everything happened so fast. But I do remember him saying to me, the only way that you're leaving her tonight is in a body bag. He had picked up a knife out of the kitchen. He eventually barricaded me in the bedroom. And I literally fought for my life. And when I tell this story, I always recount this time as me watching myself. It was like, it was an out-of-body experience. It was almost like I was watching a movie. And I do remember the knife coming towards me, but I never processed pain. Like I actually didn't realize that I had been stabbed. We were living with someone at the time. And I think I had gotten slightly complacent because, you know, he couldn't treat me as badly as he did.
Oh, I see.
But I think in that moment, I was just like, I was so shocked that he had gone to this extreme. But luckily, his friend came home and burst into the room, and I was able to run into the living room. I fell onto the couch, and he proceeded after me. He straddled me on the couch and was trying to stab me. But his friend was like, oh no, this is too much. You have to leave. And I was pushed outside of the house and the door was locked behind me.
Oh, wow.
So it's very late at night and I didn't know what I was going to do. Luckily, my mom heard me and she pulled up a little while later. So when he realized that someone was outside for me, he started throwing my clothes out the window. And it was a rainy night. There was no grass in that yard. So it was just mud. So he was throwing everything into the mud. And I remember just trying to pack up stuff and put it into my mom's car so that we could leave. In his frenzy, he drew out my Louis Vuitton bag. So when I saw that, I'm 20, in my early 20s now, like, let me get them bags. So I'm trying to hide the bags in the car. And he realized, wait a minute, I drew these bags out. So he comes outside, knife in hand, my blood all over him. And it's interesting to say, I still didn't fully process that I had been stabbed. There was a period once I was outside that I processed the heat of my blood, but I never felt pain. So he comes outside, he's bloody, he's got a knife. My mom's in the car screaming. She's like, get in the car, get in the car. And I think that's when I realized, because I was ready to fight for these bags crazy enough. Like I wanted my Louis Vuittons. And that's when I realized, like, okay, this is a really dangerous situation. And he's already come after me with a knife. I can't have my mother watch this. So I get in the car and we leave. So she's like, you got to go to the hospital. And my first response was, no, I'm not going to the hospital. There's no way that I'm going to the hospital, because if I go to the hospital with a stab wound, I'm realizing that I'm being stabbed now. If I go to the hospital with a stab wound, they're going to call the police. And that's the last thing I want right now.
See.
You know, I don't even know what my next step is. I don't need to be questioned in this moment. So I got back to my mom's house. We managed to stop the bleeding and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And not even 2 hours, she comes into the kitchen and she was like, what are you going to do? Because you can't stay here. What you mean I can't? Like, where am I going right now? Like, for real. So I called a women's resource center who instructed me to go to the police station, told them, just let them know that I need to go to their shelter. And the police escorted me to the shelter, a homeless shelter where I stayed for 2.5 months, trying to rebuild my life. that period of time was tough because I think I was slightly naive. I thought, okay, I've walked away. I've done what I've had to do. I've gotten a restraining order. I've done what I had to do. So life is going to magically be okay. Doesn't work like that. And what I found was I, got my first apartment. I didn't want to be alone. I had never been alone in my life. I had never lived alone. I didn't know how to do that. How do you navigate coming home to silence? And then what you're left with is rerunning all the mistakes that you made in your life. So what happened was I started drinking considerably. I would leave work. I would go to the bar. I would be at the bar until the bar closed. If there's any after parties, I'm there because I didn't want to be home alone.
Yeah.
And I started drinking heavily to the point where I didn't leave my house without alcohol. And that became my life for about 8 or 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Until I decided, you know what? I cannot do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And I decided to go off to university. I went off to Georgia State, loved my experience in Atlanta. And while I was there, I met someone. My first real relationship, like I had situationships in that period, but like my first real relationship since my divorce. And he was a DJ. So he was out late at night. He told me, sometimes when I DJ, I snort cocaine. I hadn't been around anybody that did anything more than smoke weed. So I was really naive to that. I had gotten full scholarships to go to Georgia State. So I was actually making a considerable amount of money while I was a student. And he took advantage of that. He took advantage of my naivety. He took advantage of my kindness. He took advantage of my vulnerable state because I hadn't healed from my divorce. And he literally spent all my money. One Christmas I spent in his apartment, no lights, no heat, no food. And I had an apartment that was fully paid for. I had family that was having Christmas dinner, but I was so ashamed that once again, I'm in such a toxic relationship and I can't seem to get myself out of it. The summer after that Christmas, I went home to work in Bermuda and I decided that I was going to surprise him for my birthday. So I returned to Atlanta to the apartment that I am paying for and I meet his wife.
I'm with you.
This wasn't a short-term relationship. We were together for 3 years.
Is she in your apartment?
She's in my apartment. Had no clue. And it really angered me that, you took everything from me. I've literally been living in hell trying to get my diploma. And you got a wife? And I'm being around your family? Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. You know what I mean? I moved back to Bermuda and I really focused on getting my life together. I got a really great job in commercial insurance. I was a catastrophe modeler and it sounds a lot better on paper than what it actually is. And I was moving on. I was doing really well at work. I was really focused. And then I met this guy. A couple of weeks before meeting him, my friend was like, the next guy, you need to write down like a list, manifest them, so I wrote a list of about 45 things that were a must in the next person that I dated. And this guy, I meet him and he's like everything but one, right? Like I wanted a 6'8" guy, I'm told. So I wanted like a mountain, right? Didn't get that. But everything else. And I felt really hard. Like within 6 weeks, we had moved in together. It felt right. It felt perfect. And then one of his family members died. And in passing before this, he had mentioned that he used to dabble with crack. And I made it very clear. Listen, I just came out of a 3-year relationship. I am not doing that again.
Yeah.
So when the family member died, I was concerned because I knew if anything would be a trigger, this would be it. And we had a conversation. How can I support you? Are you okay? And He told me everything was all right. But because of my 3-year experience, I knew immediately when he started using. Mm-hmm. And I made it known, like, I can't deal with this. So he hid it very well for a period of time until he absolutely couldn't hide it anymore. It was just so obvious. One day he had called me. I was at a conference with my job right next to his job. He used to be a chef. And he called me and he's like, I have an appointment this afternoon. Can you pick up this bag for me and take it home? And I'll see you when I get home. I didn't think anything of it. Like, so I go pick up this bag. And as soon as I pick it up, I'm surrounded by security. And they are questioning me about what's in this bag. And I'm like, I don't know. Take the bag. I don't know. And I laughed. Yeah. And a few minutes later, he called me and told me that he had been arrested. So he had been stealing meat from his job, like really expensive cuts of meat. And they caught him on camera because they had put a camera in the freezer, but they couldn't figure out how he was getting it out of the building. And that day, lucky me, I go pick it up.
Oh my gosh.
He was arrested. He was charged. And I didn't think anything of it. Like, that's on you.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks later, I got a call from the reception at my job saying, Leticia, the police are here to see you. And I'm like, what? I'm a law-abiding citizen. Like, what are they here to see me for? Anyway, I got arrested on my job for receiving this stolen meat. And I got taken to the police station. I got my one phone call. So I called my mama. And I was like, listen, you need to get me a lawyer. Like, I need to get out of here before I lose my job. Like, I'm worried about my job right now. So she comes down to the police station. I didn't expect that. And I'm sat behind glass talking to her. And she says to me, why do you love everyone else more than you love yourself? And that was like a Mike Tyson body blow. Mm-hmm. I had to go back to my cell and sit in that. And I realized the reason why I'm here today is because of the decisions I made. Like, it is what it is. Like, I can't run from that. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. My decisions have gotten me here today. And if I don't change this is going to be my reality. I'm going to be in jail. I was never charged. I was released about 8 hours later. It was really a fishing expedition to see if I would talk. But I realized then that something had to change for me. The lead up to this incident, I looked like me trying to find my boyfriend some help. And during that process, I met a woman who was a drug and alcohol counselor, but also a life coach. Mm-hmm. And I remember her saying to me, I can see that you are broken. I can see that this is really taking a toll on you and I want to help you. And I was like, girl, I'm fine. I just need to get help for my man. Like, everything's okay. But I took her card. And as soon as I was released from jail, I called her and I was like, listen, I'm ready. Something needs to change. So I worked with her for several months. And that process for me was coming to terms with the fact that by labeling myself as a victim, I'm giving my control away. I'm giving my power away. That my experiences made me a survivor, but survival isn't the final destination. Survival is just a pit stop. And I have been in survival mode. I have been in survival mode for 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. So it allowed me to walk through my mess, accept me for me. It taught me how to like me, to accept me, to love me, really, mm-hmm. which is something that I probably hadn't done since I was about 7. That process was like really mm-hmm. so liberating. It changed my life and it made me realize, like, we're going to put that victimhood behind us
Yes.
And we're not survivors, we're a thriver.
Right.
So we need to start living like we are. So I left Bermuda. That's how I ended up in England, right? I pressed reset. I came into England and I just focused on me and my boyfriend. He went into rehab shortly after I got arrested. And he moved out here probably 3 months before me.
Wait, is this the one who got arrested and got you arrested?
Yes. Yeah, he moved out here. He has been clean for 9 years. He is my husband, the father of my children.
Okay, that's exciting.
It was some happily ever after there for us. But I came out here and I really focused on building my career, focusing on building a name for myself that wasn't so negative. However, this personality that I describe as a self-contained hurricane has no business in England. It's too much for people, Because
they're so conservative.
Yeah, the conservative, the passive aggressive, like I'm too much. I'm way too much.
Yeah.
And although I reached the pinnacle of my career, I was a manager in a Lloyd's of London insurance syndicate. And for those who don't know, Lloyd's of London is the oldest insurance institution in the world. So for me, that was a tremendous accomplishment to actually be working in that historical building and being a manager at that. However, this self-contained hurricane was labeled quite early on. I'm too much. I'm too opinionated. I don't fit that bill where we just smile and act like everything's okay. No, I'm addressing it. And it became a problem. I as a Black foreign woman, and I don't like to bring race into things, but my race was constantly brought up in my position. It was difficult to have such success and still being placed into a box. And that was a trigger for me. It became triggering being in that environment and not being respected. So rather than get to a point where I got completely disrespectful and lose my job at that, I made a decision to go after what makes me happy. And what makes me happy is seeing other people move from being in survival mode into thriving, into becoming thrivers. And I started my business while I was on maternity leave with my second daughter, because 6 hours after giving birth, I received an email on my personal account from someone at work asking me about work. And it really, really triggered me, because that's just disrespectful. And I walked away completely from my 14-year career in March to pursue coaching full time. And that has been the best decision for me. Being in a position to utilize my experience to help someone else is life-changing. Yeah. Like, I get to change someone else's life, but it has forced me to focus on my personal development.
Yeah.
For that, I'm ever grateful.
I just love that you're not a victim, even though you've been through what you've been through.
I was a person that I catastrophized everything, right?
Oh, okay.
I believed that life was happening to me. Once I realized the power of my thoughts and my narrative, we can paint a picture that doesn't serve us.
Yeah.
Or we can paint a picture that empowers us to change. And I challenged myself to challenge the way that I was painting my picture.
I love that. That's the life lesson. I wish everybody understood it. I'm just ever fascinated with mother-daughter relationships, because I lost my mom when I was 18, and she wasn't really present. I just had a lifetime of being mad at her until I wasn't. And so I'm just curious, is your mom still alive?
My mom's still alive and we have an amazing relationship.
Oh, you do? That's what I wanted to ask.
What it took for us to get to a place of like where we are now was some ownership.
Okay. On your part or her part?
On her part. I needed her to own that some of her decisions really negatively impacted me.
Yeah.
And that was done. I don't have a relationship with my father because that ownership hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay with that. I've learned to protect my energy.
Yeah.
I've learned to protect my space. And a lot of people probably don't understand me cutting off a parent. But when it comes to a place where your mental health is being challenged by that relationship, I don't really think it matters what the nature of that relationship is. I think it's our responsibility to protect ourselves and our mental health.
I interviewed a bunch of women about being motherless, and I had a bunch more want to talk to me about having a mother that's alive, but they have no relationship with them. So I just think, we all have complicated relationships. I'm so glad actually that you guys are good. Is she still married to the same man?
Yes. And the reason why our relationship works so well is because he is a non-factor in our relationship.
Yeah.
Like, don't even mention him to me and we're good.
Yeah. I totally get that.
I just don't get it. Like, the children are part of the package.
Being a parent, does that make you at all understand your mother's choices any better or no?
No. I think being a parent probably made my position stronger.
Yes, I understand.
Because my children are the center point of my world.
Yeah.
And I can see if anything happens to their father and I was in a position where, I had to start another relationship, I will set my boundaries from the beginning. Mm-hmm. My relationship with my children means more to me than any romantic relationship that I can ever have. They are my legacy.
Yeah.
And knowing how much a misaligned relationship can impact a child, I never want my children in a position where they're questioning whether or not I love them, ever.
You seem to have really come from a certain place and have elevated yourself, and is just through self-help books. I mean, what did you do? What have you done besides that one life coach?
Well, the life coach was important because that began my daily work on myself.
Oh, okay.
But when I made the decision to become a coach, you have to go through training. And that training, like, you learn to self-coach, you learn to be more self-aware. That, like I said to you, the personal development that I've had to do to build my business has been tremendous. And it's so much deeper than healing my past. It was about checking myself. Being aware of my mindset has been easily the most transformational aspect of growing my business. Mm-hmm. I was aware of how much my thoughts impacted me, but now it's like awareness isn't enough. Mm-hmm. It's about shifting that perspective and taking action on the back of that so that we can change that narrative, mm-hmm. so that I'm not taking my foot off the gas because I want to see success. So I have to challenge my habits. I have to rewrite the way that I think about things and the way that I do things. I have to show up differently. And I don't think that I ever would have gotten to a place where I'm actually really pushing myself outside of my comfort zone and really challenging myself to be better than I was yesterday. And I'm grateful for that. It's all about the mindset. And I love to say I am here to help women get their mind right so they can see success and fulfillment in their lives.